Imagine having access to a tribe of mentors, experts in the biggest questions in tech. This is Making Revenue Tick.
Hello and welcome to Making Revenue Tick. I'm joined by pod alumni, Douglas Mancini. How are you doing, Douglas?
Very, very well. How are you, sir?
I am wonderful,
Great
and
to
thank
be
you for
back.
bringing. Oh yeah, well, welcome back. This is it. We love people coming back, and also new wonderful guests coming onto the podcast. So we also have Charles Talbot. Charles, how are you doing?
Yeah, I'm good. Yeah, nice to see you, Richard.
Absolute pleasure. We've had a wicked pre-chat about things that we could cover, and there's a lot of overlap in terms of the type of problems that you're helping customers with the type of problems we help customers with, but you do much more and much deeper. And if someone like you was working with our clients before we started working with them, I'm sure that it'll be much more successful. So what I'd love to do is talk about this question that we realized a lot of people struggle with, which is, when should we hire our first sales leader? When should we hire our first salespeople? And what does that depend on? And how do we make it stick? Question for you both. Why is that topic one that you're passionate about?
Because it's a problem, right? So when you've got founders, they don't know what they don't know. So if they've never managed teams, they've never hired, they've never fired, they've never done it, it's a big blind spot, and it can be a limiter. They can fail, right? And they can spend a lot of money. So, if we can help that, that's good. But yeah, just because it's such a big blind spot, and you see it every day when you're chatting to founders, when you're trying to help them, they just don't know. So yeah, that's really why it's important.
I mean, for me, look, it breaks my heart when I see founders that, I meet at the various events and master classes that we do, and they say, I think I can use your help because last year, and this is a real example, right? Last year we had 2 million ARR. Year before we had 1.6 ARR. I said, oh, great. Well, what does your sales team look like? Well, then it was me. I said, perfect, because founders are amazing salespeople. And then I hired 3 salespeople. I had to get rid of 2 of them. I rehired the 2. By the way, the third one I'm managing out now. And our ARR this year is 1.6 again. Why is that? Well, they're selling nothing, and I'm distracted by trying to manage them. And the reality is, these founders oftentimes they are successful because founders make great salespeople. They're passionate. They understand the problem, right? That they're solving for their prospects and their customers. They might have contacts in the industry because they came from the industry or the focus area, and they're selling no problem. So I hired some salespeople. They look good on paper. They interviewed well, and I asked this chap. I said, "How many salespeople did you interview when you hired these first 3?" Well, not that many, but the recruitment agency I use, they looked at a lot of CVs. Okay, that may be a mistake in itself, but more importantly than that, what kind of sales process do you have? Well, we go out and say, yeah, he couldn't iterate it because he didn't have one. So when I see this breaks my heart, when I see somebody that's on a trajectory to really get to 5 million, 10 million, 20 million ARR with a really interesting value proposition, and they not only stall themselves, they stymie themselves by not having a really solid go-to-market, lined up marketing initiatives with sales initiatives, and a sales process that gets out to the customer and answers the question through the process. This is the problem I'm solving, and this is the magnitude of the problem. This is why you want to do it at all with us and now. So that's why I'm super passionate about it, because I think this is one of the biggest mistakes startups make.
Yeah, and an expensive one.
Oh,
And I wonder,
absolutely, right? Just think of this particular example. This guy's already 3, and the other 2 that he's hired aren't working out that great either. I mean, and he's got at least 100 grand in these guys each.
yeah, it is interesting. We did a podcast that just got released last week with a fantastic CEO called Simon Black, who's just built a business from nothing and scaled it and exited it within 7 years. And he said one of his big lessons is that he should have gone for bigger and better salespeople earlier, rather than trying to home grow everyone and deal with the high failure rate, which is quite interesting. But it does mean that if you're going to go bigger earlier, then you're taking bigger bets. And so you better make sure you're de-risking those bets as best you possibly can, which a lot of those things you covered, Douglas, would obviously do that. I guess, Charles, what I'd be curious to understand is, if we're thinking about the type of person who's probably listening to this, and they're asking the type of questions like, how do we make sure we hire the right sales leader? When should we do it? What should we be looking for? What type of people do you think this is probably the most pertinent for?
Yeah, so it's someone that is has obviously got ambition to scale, has got product market fit, someone that is obviously deeply involved in the sales processes and is having some success and just wondering, when can I start to extract myself? When can I start to get a multiplier? And how can I, transfer my passion, my understanding to somebody? And what does that person look like? So it's just that tipping point of, I've got some good stuff going on. I need to do more of it. We don't know about the pressure coming down from the investors or, whatever the funding is, but it's just that I've just worked out there's a tipping point and I need to do more. But what does that look like?
Yeah, interesting. Because I think that's exactly what you just said. They're very problem aware and they know where they want to get to, but it's like the who knows the how. Who is the who knows the how? And the amount of times that when I'm talking to businesses and they wouldn't have necessarily have done the whole ClosingFoundry, really getting in and understanding their business and helping them to actually accelerate to be ready to go and do this stuff, is they're going, we know what we need, but you've got 4 or 5 people involved in that decision process who all have different opinions. And often what they've done is they've kind of glued together those requirements and built a camel built by committee. And just try and go to market for this person who's going to be the strategy person, but also go and build the pitch deck, speak to the customers, do CS, do the hiring, all of it. And often because we're going, well, we know where we need to get to, but we don't know exactly what we're looking for. What's your view on that, Douglas?
Yeah, no, I think that's right. And I think there's the who and the how. I think I love that, because once you know the how, it's so much easier to identify the who, right? So, and I've seen this, I saw this firsthand, right? I actually was hired early on, like, I don't know, must be 12 years ago. I joined my first full-time startup as the first, head of sales for the startup. They never should have hired me. I mean, if I, at the risk of sounding arrogant, if I wasn't me, it would have been a dismal failure. So maybe they made the right decision. I don't know, but I think they were way premature to hire a head of sales, because they had a successful small sales team in one region and they wanted to expand globally. And it's an example of, you don't have the process, you don't really understand how the problem is going to resonate in another market. Because a lot of times you have to tweak that problem statement. And the magnitude of the problem is going to be slightly different as well. So I find founders, they and founding teams, they think, well, I'll hire somebody senior and they'll figure it out. And sometimes that happens, but more what we see, and in my last 15 years working with startups, more often than not, it doesn't. Even the senior people, they're used to coming in and okay, well, give me the marketing collateral. Well, the marketing collateral is really a little bit woolly. It's not that great. Oh, wow. Okay. I'm used to having that. I'm used to having a problem statement that makes sense. I'm used to having already, email cadences that are running. Do we have the best salespeople in the world and all that? Can we hire the best salespeople in the world? You really need to look for a different who, based on the how. So you have to understand, you have to have a process of how you're going to market, what the problem really is, and where you are in your maturity curve, and be honest with yourself. And that helps you. And that's one of the things that we do. And we do this in not like a 6-month engagement. We do this in 5 days. We come in, it's short, it's sharp. This is, if they have a go-to-market, this is your as-is go-to-market. This is what we feel your to-be go-to-market should be. Sometimes they don't have a go-to-market, so that makes it easier or harder, depending on how you look at it. But we say, this is what we think based on our frameworks that we have, that we built up over a lot of years of experience. This is what your go-to-market should look like. This is what your sales process should look like. And by the way, this is the type of salespeople you should hire. This also brings us to another discussion. I was getting to be a very long answer to your question, but it brings another really interesting topic. When do you hire a sales leader versus sales individual contributors versus player coaches?
Or even a sales leader that's happy to come down, right? A sales leader that's happy
Absolutely, yeah.
to be in
Yeah.
company for a while.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
if you can get that, if they've got the appetite and they want to get, the hands dirty, which is clearly what needs to happen, that can be an amazing hire, right? Because they've done it, they come down, they understand about the problem space, they get the difference between what's a sales process, what's sales method, and what sales qualification, right? And then they can apply that stuff. I think just kind of expanding that point, shit gets real when the founder realizes he needs to hire somebody. And it's like, well, the founder doesn't know what a sales process, sales method, sales qualification is, but that needs to be extracted and transposed to whoever
Yeah.
this magical person is. And yeah, if you've never done it, then you can't extract it in the right way and then train it the right way.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I love that. We have that conversation every week. Is what exactly do we need? We know we want this person for 18 months, 24 months time we to be ready for Series B, but the job now is very different. And the next 12 months, if things don't come true in terms of execution, you won't be going and getting that Series B, and then all of that proper scale and CRO type level of responsibility will be important. Right now, you just need someone who's going to go and talk to customers and get deals
Yeah,
done.
definitely. I think it's a nice idea to say, well, I'm going to hire this person was a sales leader in the last 3 roles, but I'm going to hire him or her to be an individual contributor for the next 12 months. And then as we go to Series B or Series A, well, that's a risky strategy because people may think they want to go back into hands-on selling. And by the way, some of them were probably better salespeople than sales leaders, and that's a whole nother podcast we could probably do on that, right? Do the best football players make the best football coaches? Probably not. But anyway, but if they're not comfortable doing that, and if they've spent the last 15 years being a sales leader in a relatively mature, very mature organization, especially some of the big names, I think they're really going to suffer having to create their own collateral, understand their own problems, doing all the stuff you do in a startup as an individual contributor. So I think you made a point. I think you made the point. Anyway, I'm going to make the point. Hire for the next 12 to 18 months. Don't worry about people that you can promote that, you're not going to have to. Your first sales leader is not going to be with you for more than 2 years. That's statistically just the fact. And people say, oh, that's because they fail. Not always. Sometimes they're just, you get a sales leader that's an amazing player coach to begin with, then becomes a first line manager, and they build a little sales team of 6, 8, maybe 10, even 10 people, a couple of BDRs, etc. Are they really the person then to scale the business to the next level? Because if you hire a second line leader down to a player coach, that's probably going to fail, because that's a little bit too far for that person to stretch back into their past. But you get somebody that's going to be a player coach and then be a first line manager, either from the beginning or after 6 months, that'll be good for probably 12, 18 months, depending on your growth trajectory. And then you hire your second line manager. And then that person's probably only going to be good for 2 years. And then you need a true VP, a true CRO. And that's a whole nother level. And you do want to hire people that have done it in the past.
Yeah, I love that. So we'll talk about that. It's like who should you hire and when, based on some factors that you would go and help businesses with. But I'm curious to give you guys the opportunity to introduce ClosingFoundry, because when we first spoke, I was going, you're the who knows the how, for a lot of these founders and PEs who are going, well, we know we need to move the revenue from here to here and the team from there to there and the customers from there to there. They've maybe been failing, or they've got some investment and they don't want to waste it. So Charles, we got ClosingFoundry, and what's the problem that you solve in the world?
Yes. So we're a go-to-market and B2B sales execution agency, for want of a better phrase, or consultancy. And we typically get involved where growth is declining, kind of flatlining, or it's just not where it needs to be. So it might be growing, but not fast enough. And what we do is we run a closing operating system. So we have a design phase where in 5 days, we'll show you what to fix and how to execute it at 90. We have an enable phase whereby we kind of put those we make that behavioral change happen through training, playbooks, CRM alignment, all that kind of stuff from the tech side. And then a run phase, which is about making that operating cadence stick. So we can either stick around or, stick around until we hire someone in to replace. So yeah, already that's what we do.
And it's important to note that we're all operators. We're not consultants. And there's a big difference. Consultants leave you with documents and frameworks and good luck. Let us know if we can write you another study. We actually make it executable, and we can even help with the execution.
Yeah, and I think that bit's important because if we look at Douglas, he's got, mega enterprise, Okta, Oracle, he's done the mega deals, but has also worked in startups and scale-ups. So that full journey and appreciation of what is value selling, how do you manage the politics in the deal, how do you, run a deal cycle, and then applying that back down, having worked in startups and scale-ups, that's a unique mix. So I suppose that's the litmus test for the operators that we work with.
What was the problem you were observing in the market that made you go, look, we're going to solve this ourselves?
It was just the dichotomy of a founder needs to sell, but has got no idea to how to sell. That was it. Early days, I was dealing with some accelerators and incubators, so super early stage, and then you started to land some other clients, and there's just these big blind spots, as I mentioned earlier. The first sales hire might have loads of contacts in the industry, but they've never run that sales process because it's a mid-market or an enterprise sales process, or it needs a value selling motion, and they're a transactional seller. It doesn't work, but neither of them know it doesn't work, right? Until 12 months down the line, and you can't progress the deals because they're stuck in the middle. So yeah, so the working hypothesis was obviously right at the beginning, and then it just starts to get reinforced as you get more and more work.
Yeah, and the more founders we talk to, it resonates so much. But there's sort of two types of founders. There's the ones that know they're terrible salespeople. Actually, there's three types of founders. There's the very few that are amazing salespeople and, maybe have a sales background historically. They're pretty few and far between because usually they're solving at least in our space, they're solving a technical problem. So they come from more of a technical side. So there's the ones that think they're great salespeople and they're not. And those are the worst ones. And then there's the ones that know they're not a great salespeople person and they need help because they know they have a great product and they just don't know how to get it to market. And those are the ones we love to work with because they're coachable. They're usually highly, highly intelligent. I was listening to a podcast the other day and somebody said something about the most intelligent people I ever met don't remind you how intelligent they are.
So let's talk about the how. So let's say I'm a founder and I'm going, right, I know I really want to scale this thing. And ultimately there's some kind of event and exit that I've got in mind, but I don't know when I should hire a sales leader. I know I'm doing too much myself. I know it's too reliant on me. I know I'm a bottleneck for the business. And I do have some funds to go and take a bet on the right person to help us to go and scale this and build the systemization and build the team, manage the team that we've got in a better way. So I can go and do all the things that I need to be doing in the business and on the business as a founder. Talk me through what your approach is to help that person understand when is the right time to go and hire that sales leader.
It's quite subjective, right? And it requires some instinct and it requires some signals. And I think when a founder is starting to see, and it's a lovely phrase, but some repeatability, when they start, we're at we're never at a product market fit, but when they've sold some, right, cold, not through their own network, when they've sold some cold, 1, 2, 3, and the message is resonating, and they're starting to see things that from cold where they can move them quite easily. They're not getting ghosted, all that kind of stuff. That says, I know this is subjective, those signals suggest there's some repeatability of the message resonating and moving things forward. Net, there's some potential there, and you can start to pick that up. So we will ask questions like that. If those things aren't happening, then it's probably not the right time to hire. The other layer here is maybe the founder's not very good at selling, right? And maybe those things exist or could exist if they had the right approach, right? So you need some of the, I suppose, that experience to understand and to be able to unpick what's true and what's not. So that's broadly a fairly subjective way to look at it, but it's all based on signal.
Yeah, I think when you look at the first sales leader, just to reiterate what Charles said, is if you have a sales team that's just starting to fire on all cylinders, right? So they're having repeatability, they've got good messaging that's resonating, that's getting meetings, that's moving through. But like any sales team, to get deals to consistently move through a process, it requires hand-on management and leadership. And the founder either is really inequipped to do that, and we can help a little bit. But like one of your past guests said, most founders at best are going to be middling sales leaders. They're not going to be superstar sales, and it's not their job. They shouldn't be, right? They need to be CEOs. So that's a great time to hire somebody, bring them in. There's a process. It seems to be working. We understand the go-to-market approach, but we need somebody really, the first sales leader is really about running the sales team, not building some strategic vision for world domination. That'll come in 2 years, right? Again, looking at the historical data with sales leaders lasting about 24 months. Actually, I think it's closer to 14. But if we take out the non-performant ones, it's probably closer to 24 months. It's just skills, experience. We want somebody to come in that has done world domination. So I think that's really some of the things that our framework looks at. You know, it's about repeatability. It's about process in place. It's about pipeline, volume, and cycle time. And once you start to get to a certain level in those areas, then it's time to pull the trigger, bring in a first line sales leader, or maybe even a player coach to start with. So maybe you'll start a new territory as well as manage these 3 or 4 salespeople.
Yeah, interesting. I think Jason Lemkin says that 70% of sales leaders will fail in the first year, which makes a lot of sense. And then if the average tenure of a CRO is 14 months or maybe even less in this climate, it makes a lot of sense that we need to hire like you say, the person for the next 18 months. And sales is the cure-all, isn't it? You know, fundamentally, if we have sales, we have data, we have cash, we have all the things that we need to actually go and then do the strategy. Because a strategy without sales and without cash, it's just a document, right?
Just a nice idea.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm curious to ask, because I would imagine one of the gaps here would be if they're not a trained sales leader and they haven't grown up with CRM and the need to have an accurate, up-to-date CRM with sales stages so you can go and do a data analysis. I would imagine getting good data out of a more of a technical founder or a non-commercial founder might be a bit of a challenge, because you won't have all of the history of opportunities they've worked on. They might be showing like a 70-80% win rate, but it's because stuff only made it into the CRM if it kind of got to quote stage and proposal stage. So what's the reality if I'm a founder in my business? Should I be worried if I haven't got a CRM? What would you expect to see, and how would you help someone who might not have the best data for you to do your analysis from?
The reality exists again in this kind of gray area of subjectivity around a deal, right? So whether it's a CRM or a spreadsheet, you know, whatever the deal is at this stage, I don't think it matters, because we're obviously talking about, you know, for a fairly early stage. What matters is how well qualified that deal is, and that comes from listening to transcripts, okay? Because the founder's not going to know that actually this is a really well qualified deal, or this isn't, or these are the gaps, or whatever. So I kind of bin the CRM idea and just get into some of the detail of the individual opportunities to understand, should it be binned? You know, why are you wasting your time on it? You know, or is that a quality opportunity that's got potential to close? So I think just going a little bit deeper is important. You know, it comes back to the point is the founder doesn't know what he doesn't know. And in a lot of cases, the salespeople don't know what they don't know, right? So just having some form of level of inspection to, put the chaos into some kind of order and take a view on whether, how good that pipeline is.
And sometimes until you do that, you don't know if they're ready to hire.
Yeah. Well, spoken like true operators, right? Because I guess a consultant would say, "Show me your CRM and let me go and do a data extract." But the reality is, if you can go and listen to calls and actually have like you guys come in almost like doctors looking at an X-ray, rather than us coming in with all of our bias and going, "Yeah, they really liked us. We had great rapport. We played golf for years, so it's definitely going to close." Or a salesperson who doesn't have much pipeline, so they emotionally want to win every single deal that they do have in the pipeline, rather than having an abundance of pipeline and opportunities to be able to rule stuff out that they should never work. And I remember famously being told that the worst outcome isn't to lose a deal. The worst outcome is to continue to work a deal that you should have rejected.
Truer words never spoken. I mean, that is so true.
Yeah,
And I think,
absolutely.
the listening to deals, I think, is so key, right? So because it's human nature. So we'll get off this podcast and we'll say, that was amazing. We got our points across, the report that people, this is going to be 5 stars, everybody. We're going to get 1 million views. And then we watch it and we say, do you see the face that Charles made? I think Charles didn't like when I said it, and that's the thing about listening to sales calls. Human nature is you want it to be positive. Um, and when it's not, when your prospect is saying, I just don't get it, okay, that's the obvious. But sometimes they're like, oh yeah, no, this is interesting. And then when you listen to the recording, you listen to the tone of their voice, you watch their facial expressions, maybe some hand motions, and you realize actually they're really not that much into it. We need to focus more on this. So here's the follow-up email, and it helps. Now, when we go into a client and they don't have call recordings, which is more often than not, then we do role plays. And role plays will reveal a lot about the way salespeople, or even founders for that matter, are positioning their solution and the problem that they're solving and the magnitude of the problem.
That can I extend the point a little bit? And I've got a question, Douglas. So a lot of people don't get sales, right? And it's weird because there's so much stuff around sales. It's really, there's confusing and contradictory and all that kind of stuff. And I think there's a moment of enlightenment, right? When you're like, shit, it's just that, right? And that gives you the lens to be able to inspect these call recordings, or do the role play and just get whatever it is, whether it's a moment of enlightenment or a spidey sense or whatever. I'd be interested to know whether you agree with that, Douglas, because that gives you the superpower to a certain extent to go and do these inspections.
I don't like instinct in sales, because I think that is too much. I mean, sales is science and art, but I think, especially in the last few years, it's become much, much more science. And I think that's a good thing. So I'm not sure that there's an instinct, but there is certainly emotional intelligence. And
Well, I mean, an understanding. That's what I'm trying to say. I now understand sales, therefore I can inspect that call.
right. I think you have to have a checklist. On the last podcast, I talked about hiring, and I hired to a rubric. And there are similarly to the rubric for hiring, I have a rubric, which actually I haven't written down. I need to write it down. It's kind of in my head, and that's always dangerous. I have a rubric for listening to sales calls. What I'm looking for is, are you building rapport, first and foremost? Are you adding value in the customer or prospect's language? So you're not talking about you and the problem you solve right away. You're talking about the industry and what you're seeing in the industry, because you're building credibility. I've done some research. I'm talking about early calls, right? Even later calls, though, it could be extending on the conversations you had previously about, oh, I saw one of your competitors did this. I just noticed that, such and such got approval for this medical, blah, 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 if they're in that profession. And so now you're building your rapport, you're building credibility, and then you're helping through discovery questioning, you're defining the problem that the customer faces. Do you have this problem? Do you feel this pain? Yeah, but it's really not that bad. Really? Because I was talking to one of your competitors and they said, if you get this wrong, it's going to be this magnitude. Well, yeah, actually, I hadn't thought it. So now you're increasing the pain. That's great in a call. And then, but don't worry, here's how I solve it. I'm creating pain and I'm taking it away. So that's kind of my head rubric. And I think I will document that. Maybe I'll put the link in the comments below, but to it. And there's a few other little bits and pieces, but I think there's that. And then there's the emotional intelligence of watching this process go through. And it's not just, oh yeah, he said that. Oh yeah, she did that. Okay, that's good. But watching the response of the counterpart, if it's a video call. And thank goodness most of our offline, non-real time meetings are videos nowadays. So you can look at facial expressions and you can try to guess how well these things are resonating. And then you can decide, is it the AE that's not pitching it the way that's, acceptable or resonating with the person, or is it just the person, right? So anyway, so that's kind of that's I've never been asked to dissect my spidey sense on this stuff, but that's a long-winded way of doing it, I suppose.
Well, it makes me think of patterns. So your experience helps you to spot the patterns. And if you have frameworks and fluency around executing frameworks and the experience to spot patterns, then you are more likely to be able to predict outcomes. And I think that's probably the gap, which gives you the certainty and confidence to go, I'm not worried about this. It's like, this is for me, I'm in flow. I'm consciously competent or unconsciously competent rather than blindly oblivious.
Yeah. And I've been toying with how do you, because we talk about operators. So what does an operator mean versus a consultant, right? Obviously it's someone that's done it before, but what is the magic dust? How do we distill that commercial insight, the signals, knowing when something is, oh, that's good or that's bad? And then let's say there were 10 signals, 5 are good, 5 are bad. What does that mean, right? I'm not sure how to distill it or even, talk about it, but I think it's a really interesting area because that's the gap, as you say, between knowing and not knowing.
Yeah. It's curious for me because you're basically taking the 10,000 hour principle, which you have as the who's, you know the how, and then boiling that down into this 5-day thing. So tell us more about the 5 days that you've developed.
We run a diagnostic. There'll be a goal, right? So whatever the goal is, I want to hire, somebody. Am I ready to hire that? I want to add a new sales motion. I want to, we want to go into enterprise. We want to launch a new market, whatever it is. There's a goal. So we will look at the product, which is actually the problem, right? Kind of interchangeable. We will look at the people, we'll look at the process, and we'll look at repeatability. So those kind of 4 dimensions. We'll ask them questions. So we'll talk to sales leader, we'll talk to product, we'll talk to different areas. Then we'll have a working hypothesis based on our spidey sense. And then we will deliver a readout. So generally it's a go-to-market plan with a now, next, later plan with owners and evidence and all that kind of stuff. So that sets the direction for whether it's an additional, a new go-to-market strategy or an adjustment in the go-to-market strategy. And yeah, then it's about execution and moving on to the enable phase.
Yeah, and as part of it, you get the 30, 60, 90-day plan. So it's not just, here's a nice go-to-market strategy, just implement it and you'll be fine. Call us if you need another go-to-market strategy. But here's the activity that has to take place to execute this. Now, as we do more and more of these, we're being asked to help to execute on the 30, 60, 90-day plan. And that's terrific. We love doing that because we like to kind of drink our own champagne, if you like, live with it. Because I think the best practitioners are the ones that, I would say, like in your house, if the finished woodwork guy is the guy that's doing the painting and the decorating at the end, he's going to do a better job of finished woodworking because he knows he's going to have to correct all the problems before the final finish goes on. And it's kind of the same with this. But even if our customer has the resources and the ability to do it themselves, they have a plan. As Charles said, it has owners, it has outcomes, it has evidence. And then we continue, irregardless of who's delivering the plan. We have a 30-day check-in, a 60-day check-in, and a 90-day check-in to make sure if they have questions I mean, if they have questions, they can ask at any time, but it's more 30 days. You've been at this a month. Oh, has it really been a month already? So that's always the start. And then, how have you done executing on the 30-day things? Where can we help? Can we be more explicit? Can we get involved? Do we need to get involved? And we do that 30, 60, and 90. And that's a big differentiator than just a consultancy drop.
Yeah. And I forgot about the new dimension that we've added to the 5 data scale design phase. So we're now working with somebody that's pretty technical, but is also commercial, value selling, GTM. So he's started inspecting products at a really quite a deeper level, and connecting that to what is this project at? What are you saying the product does? What does it actually do? What could it do? Right? From a technical perspective, and then that can feed all the way through to actually we should be talking to a different ICP. Actually, we should be saying something entirely different. Or actually, what we're saying it can do actually can't do, and it won't be able to do for 6 months. So we should shift to something else. Which is I'd never considered that, but yeah. So going deep on the tech, literally, at whatever the level he goes in at is a new addition.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a differentiator for us as well. We're lucky to have Pedro on our team.
Yeah, for sure. We actually had Christina Hamlin, who was one of the chief product designers at DocuSign. Was very integral in terms of the design of DocuSign's like latest offering on the podcast. And it was amazing the detail she got into around what goes into great design of product to find market fit and to get really in the head of the customer to help solve their problems in a way that is so seamless that they might not even realize you're solving it for them. It's just part of how they use the tool. You're helping them execute their workflow. And it was brilliant to do that. And it made me realize I hear people talking about product market fit all the time, but often who aren't the product experts. And then the product experts in the business are often so far away from the customers and truly understanding the customer's problems and the workflow and how they want to go and do the work and whether the product helps them or just adds a load of complexity. That a lot of the time when I'm talking to salespeople who have failed and they say, oh, the product wasn't ready for enterprise. We didn't have great product market fit. We were facing all of these operational delivery problems. Often I think it's that gap between really understanding your product and how it links to the go-to-market strategy and how the salespeople go and work and execute on what you need and the messaging and the capabilities. That often that's a huge part of the gap. So I think that's a brilliant addition that you're looking so deeply into product capability and gaps, because without a great product, your sales team's going to have a bloody hard job, right?
Well, the whole company is, yeah. And this kind of bore out of one of our recent clients who thought they had a sales problem. And when we got into it, they really had, I'd call it almost a use case understanding stroke market, product market fit problem. The sort of, oh no, I get it, but is it worth spending money on kind of thing. And then we ended up contacting Pedro and it worked. So we've worked with him in the past. It worked so well. We got him on full time now. So
yeah, I love it. Can we make it real? So you can white label this, but could we talk through a couple of examples that would really illustrate this story for the listeners? So could you talk us through an example or two of real customers who you've taken through this process, what they started with, and then what the outcome was?
yeah, I mean, it's funny because I've got a couple of examples and if you listen to them, and I will give them, you'll realize this stuff is not really rocket science. So we've had a customer who wanted to go into a new market. Quite frankly, they'd been in business quite a few years, very successful. But they'd always been focused on the UK market, and they had kind of cornered the UK market in their space years ago. So they were very good at upselling and cross-selling, but they admitted we really don't understand this hunting thing as well as we need to. That's what we need help with. Here's the market. Here's our thoughts. So they had a go-to-market framework that they thought they would use. Can you come in and help us? And it was, very basic stuff like, well, what are you selling? well, we're selling and I can't, because we're still working with them and we're under NDA. I can't talk too much about what they're selling. We're selling a system that does X, Y, and Z. So what does that mean to me, right? What problem are you solving? And it sounds like a really simple question, but actually to find the killer problem that you're solving, because the problem has to be big enough, or the pain and gain, right? So the problem is the pain. There could also be a gain. Well, we're enabling, we can enable our prospects and customers to enter to expand their revenue or something like that. But more often than not, it's a problem. But the problem's got to be big enough that it's in the top 3 priorities, right? Because otherwise it's like, yeah, it's a problem, but we can kind of live without it. Is compliance something you can live without? Probably not. That moves it up, right? Is efficiency something you can live without? Well, not really, because we can't hire additional people because it's such a unique skill set. So if you can make the people that we have more efficient. So we put together a go-to-market strategy for them, which was really kind of soup to nuts. And we did it under the 5 days to scale. It doesn't take a long time, even in a more complex space, including email sequences, identifying the problem, saying, I'll bet you have this problem, GPTs that we guided them to help build GPTs that help them to quickly analyze and hyper-personalize the messaging in that going out. So how does this relate to hiring, you ask? Well, now we've got the one salesperson they have in this new market, being efficient, growing pipeline, having conversations, moving through the revised sales stages, because their sales stages were really focused on upsell, cross-sell, which were very different than new business sales stages. Now it's time, well, we want to expand. Now, we know that we have a problem statement that's resonating. We know we're getting pipeline. We're signing our first new business revenue in many years. This is great. So we want to scale it. Okay, now you can bring salespeople in because you have a process, you have a set of messages, you have a defined problem, you have a mechanism. So that's one example.
That's just, then you can start to create some repeatability. So, but yeah, it's disproving the working hypothesis on putting that go-to-market in once it's proven, which it has been, and then creating the infrastructure to I hate the word scale, to scale it, right? So yeah.
Yeah, overused word, but it does describe what we're trying to do. I like it. What example would you bring up, Charles? A favorite example of a customer problem that they've come to you with, and then what you've guided them through in terms of a process to achieve an outcome.
Yeah, so I think it's just, how do we sell more? So we know the use cases. So let's do a founder-led seller example. We know the use cases. In fact, we've got too many use cases, right? So where should we be focused on? And actually, there's disagreement with that. Should it be, 1, 2, 3? Okay. Help us work out which is the best one based on your commercial knowledge. So 5 days to scale. Do that. But with that lens of what should we go to market with, because we don't know, right? We're confused because we've got limited understanding of message market fit, product market fit, clearly no go to market fit. So went through the process, identified the types of either use cases they should use, which type of sales motion as well, because obviously, well, for in this instance, there's PLG, there's mid-market. There was no pricing, there was no, mechanism. Is there a free trial? Is there, what does that look like? So created that. So that was obviously the design phase. And then in a vacuum of understanding of what B2B sales is, in a vacuum of no sales process, no understanding of how to do discovery, and against a newly positioned problem space, implement that. And, we're running it. So then it's the hand in glove, which, is important. We're doing it. We've got a call. How do I execute discovery? Right. Okay. You need to talk about this, this, and this. Don't talk about anything else. Don't talk about yourself much, whatever the tactics are. Right. After the call, we didn't book a meeting from a meeting or whatever the tactic is. So yeah, hand in glove support. And then slowly, they started to understand what sales is, but just by doing it, right? Practically doing it, because there was no time to, there's no time to train and, do proper sessions and proper enablement and all that kind of stuff, because you're making the plane right when it's flying. So net gone through that process, landed some customers, got some, committed revenue, committed pilots. And yeah, again, fairly, we did what we said we were going to do, work it out, get them to execute, land some deals.
Yeah. Okay. Brilliant. So just bringing this example home then. So let's say I'm that founder and I've worked with you guys and we've created the right environment to now go and hire that sales leader. What would be true in my business that you would say, right, we're ready to go and hire this first sales leader?
Well, if we're talking about sales leaders, again, it's having a few salespeople. I'm a big believer in hire salespeople before you hire a sales leader, which means the founder is going to have to step up a little bit and be a quasi sales leader. And again, we can help with that. There's a lot of people that can help with that. They can read some books on that. It's not a natural behavior for everybody, but it's not that complicated. So once you have a few salespeople that have seen some success, and to Charles's point, we have repeatability. So you've proven you have a product market fit. You've proven that you have a sales process that's either working or it's working okay. Let's put it that way. Then is a good time to bring in a sales leader and say, look, we've got this thing. It probably needs a little shaping. I, as the founder, I'm not a great sales leader. We put this process in place. It's working, but it could probably work better. And I want to expand the sales team and really drive the next level of growth. To me, those are the criteria. I'd be curious, Charles, if you have anything to add to that.
No, I mean, it ticks all the boxes. I think there's nuance, isn't there, right? So what type of personalities have you got? So what type of personality is the founder? What are the drivers? Do they just want to step away because they're scared of doing sales and that's not their sweet spot? So I suppose there's that type. What are the dynamics? So the personality dynamics that are informing the decision needs to go into the mix, so to speak.
Yeah, I think that psychology is so important. Whenever we're working with someone and you can just tell they just want to hand it off, particularly at the early stage, it's going to fail, because you can't just give someone the keys to the kingdom without proper enablement, without proper support, and without a really great partnership, because the amount that they're going to have to be leaning on the business to learn and get inputs from marketing and from product. And if that is the founder, they probably have a lot of that information themselves, getting all the past information, leveraging relationships, all those things. Without that partnership approach to getting that person to be successful, it's gonna fail. So I think it's an excellent point. But what it reminds me of is one thing, which is hiring is not the end. And I remember like the first viral post I ever did on LinkedIn was, when does the hiring process end? And it had like a USA team doing the baton handover. And my point was, it ends at the end of a breakthrough. And whether that's a defined onboarding process or whether you have a clearly defined set of success criteria, it says, when you have completed your breakthrough, these things will be true. And they've completed that, it means the hiring process has ended. So just talk me through your approach to helping people not only just be ready to go and create that environment to hire the right sales leader, but how you support them through that very important and dangerous time when the person's new in post and yet isn't yet delivering the intended value that you were hoping to achieve when you hired them.
Okay, so this is the enablement bit, right? Let's forget the personality bit. So they need to be exhibiting behaviors, and so forget whatever sales process is for other sales method or qualification. What are the right behaviors for prospecting? What are the right behaviors for discovery? Broadly, we know. And, maybe this plays into Douglas's rubric. In fact, it directly leads into Douglas's rubric. If you know what the behaviors are, we know obviously, you can write them down. And if you can see in the first few couple of months or couple of weeks, so you support them with what the behaviors are. These are what they are. This is how we can help you, execute these behaviors. We think it's our best shot, right? Then you start to listen and see. So you listen to calls, you see what's happening in the numbers. Obviously, you're fairly early on, create pipeline, advance, early stage opportunities. We can very quickly see whether the appetite is there. Are they coachable? Are they taking on what you've said? And making the changes to get to whatever the behaviors are, right? So it's a quite intense period. And sometimes it might be that, because the seller's going through a process, a change process, right? And that's what that's what they signed up for. But can they do it? Yeah, because they might think they can do it, but actually they're not capable of doing it, right? So you need to make a call of that. You'll have your working hypothesis and some spidey signals to start firing off or whatever early on. And then later on, a month later, you might be, actually, I was right. This person's not capable of doing it. Obviously, that's a negative kind of example. But the point is, they need to be enabled correctly. It's about repetition and reinforcement and ensuring that you're monitoring the right behaviors and taking a view on whether they can actually make those change in the behaviors. And if they can, great. But if they can't, knowing when to stop will be my perspective.
What about you, Douglas? Talk us through those behaviors and how you blend that into the rubric that you use to help people to assess that, which is quite a subjective thing for a lot of people to say they just don't fit. What are the behaviors you're looking to see?
Yeah, well, I love my rubric because it's not only a great tool for hiring, it's a great tool for managing and quite frankly growing AEs. But I break it down into 4 categories. And by the way, I'll put a link to my rubric. And Charles always hates when I do this because he thinks we should sell it. And I say, no, but this is just the rubric from the last time I used it. It changes every time and people have to make it their own. So I think the value's in the framework rather than the actual content. Anyway, I break it down into sales craft, customer engagement, commercial acumen, and professional habits. And sales craft, when I'm looking for the top, I score everybody from 1 to 5, and they do self-scoring as well. Sales craft, I'm looking for behaviors like being really proactive. And this is where curiosity comes in. So before you go on a sales call, you not only learn a little bit about your customer, you learn about the customer's business, their industry, the trends that are affecting it, maybe macro policy that's affecting it. So you can have that level of conversation. Really being able to engage with C-levels. And we just did a go-to-market drop-in session on how to get to C-levels and then what to say once you get there. And I think this comes into it. So this is all part of sales craft. And the one I'm thinking, the rubric I'm thinking of is from enterprise selling. If you're in an SMB, it'll be slightly different. This is back to my point. They're always a little bit different and you have to kind of make it your own. But really understanding the problem that you're solving, understanding how to get the problem across and put the problem in the seat of your prospect so they feel like they have the problem, being able to identify the magnitude of it. And, we could talk forever about, how AI has changed the game in selling. But one thing I will say that I think is absolutely fabulous about AI, really, really highly sales craft sales AEs or salespeople can now use ChatGPT, et cetera, to be able to create ROI models on the fly and really be able to have that magnitude of solving the problem discussion. So that's kind of in sales craft. Customer engagement, kind of similar, but it's really how are you influencing your prospect's strategy in this particular area? How are you influencing the whole buying committee and understanding it? So it's really how you engage with the customer um, in more of just this is less lead gen and this is more ongoing and how you drive through the sales process from a customer engagement standpoint. Then the third one, commercial acumen, is all about, how are you maximizing the deal value and shortening the sales cycle? And then part of that, forecast accuracy, absolutely critical, because if you're doing all the right things, that comes into its own. And then professional habits are kind of the table stakes, right? It's how you manage your time. It's how you keep your CRM up to date if you have a CRM, or your spreadsheets or whatever. It's the discipline to do the graph that you may not like doing. So that's an example of the skills rubric and some of the behaviors that I'm looking for. And again, this is more of an enterprise focused one. SMB might be slightly different. And if you're really going to mass market, it will be different again.
I love that. Yeah, I remember when you first shared the rubric with me and I was telling you about the statistic, which is 17 out of every 20 companies don't have any defined behaviors that they're looking to see within their teams. They never defined what an A player looks
Yeah.
like, but they all want to hire one. And I think that anyone that takes the time to document what the behaviors that we're looking to see are will achieve the result, because you can't say, right, breakthrough looks like you're on quota, you know, you've achieved this number, because that's the result. It's a result of doing the right activity with the right attitude.
Absolutely. And sometimes, look, in sales, and this is one of the most frustrating things about sales, if not the most frustrating thing, you could do all the right stuff and not hit quota. And sometimes, some years, that's just the way it goes. And, I use this term, I don't use this term lightly. It absolutely breaks my heart when I see a really good AE that is exhibiting all the right behaviors get fired because they didn't make their number. And the problem is, and the reason that happens is twofold, I think. One is, well, I need to show management that I'm making tough decisions and doing the right stuff. Okay. You could also show management that you understand your business and you understand people and you have emotional intelligence, but that's the other side of the coin. But the other thing is, you don't, it's a subjective measure. Is the person exhibiting the right behaviors? I don't think so. Otherwise, he or she would have hit their quota. Okay, boss, I'll fire him. Whereas you could say, well, yeah, actually, I've been working with this person and I have examples of these behaviors, and they've moved actually in this category from a 3 to a 4, or this one from a 4 to a 5, or from a 1 to a 4, whatever it may be. And you have really, and they understand the product and they really have great relationships, but this year just didn't work out. Sometimes that happens. It's a much easier internal discussion to have, and you'll build a lot of loyalty amongst your AEs.
Yeah. But just to add to that point, I think to the getting rid of AEs or sellers because they don't hit target, they might have been trained on the wrong sales process because the management has got the wrong sales process or sales method, or the infrastructure is wrong in some way, shape, or form. And that's generally the case, that the system is wrong. It's not the seller, right? So it's two sides to that coin.
I mean, we're
Yeah.
getting a little off topic, but man, I'm getting deja vu from my first podcast, though. What makes you tick? Where we talked about skills, not tools, right? I mean, how many places have we seen, workplaces we've seen, go to market teams we've seen, or say, we're a med pick organization, now use it. Here's Gone, get on with it. And we've done no enablement whatsoever, other than, maybe send them the white book, on MedPick selling and this, that, and the other. And they read the book. But if it does, I remember at one place I worked, I was a sales leader, uh, global sales leader. And one of the regional leaders came to me and said, I really want to give my team spin selling training. I said, okay, it's fine. Spin's okay. I said, I'll approve it, but I want a plan from you on how you're going to reinforce it, because it'll be a great 2 days. I guarantee it. The dinner will be superb. Everybody's the team bonding with the trainer and yourself will be fabulous. And that's great. But will you be using it in 3 months, 6 months, 12 months? And I need to see a plan on how to do that. And of course, she didn't deliver a plan, so I never approved the expense because she didn't understand that, right? And I think there's a lot of people that do. They think, well, I'll send everybody on a training and they'll do it. But you have to be able to reinforce it, and it has to come from the top down. So in fact, I would argue, if we're going to implement spin selling, we do it across all regions. When I'm talking to AEs or I'm talking to sales managers as a second line leader, I'm going to be asking questions around spin methodology in the terms of deals, and you should be doing the same with your AEs. And then it becomes part of the culture, the selling culture, and it reinforces that behavior. And then if you have a rubric, that should go into the rubric as well.
Yeah. I'd just like to add, whether this is a good thing or a bad thing, I think it's a good thing. So it's technology used in the right direction. But you can obviously get 80% there. You can record behaviors, gong. You can put, you know what questions to ask. You know the topics to ask about. So you can go from behaviors to competencies to sales KPIs, right? So you can start to see if okay, we're going to retrain on discovery. You can start to see the conversion rate from, discovery to demo, or that's a cliche, whatever it is. But end to end with technology now, it's really possible to go from behavior to revenue. It's kind of strategic enablement.
Yeah, I love that. One thing you said that I just want to give the contrarian view is, well, not contrarian view, maybe wrong labeling, which is the other side of the coin is you can have someone who's hitting quota who behaviorally, oh, why can't I say that word? From a behavior perspective, is terrible and is absolutely cancerous to your business. And often those people, particularly in early stage, we're so scared to lose them from the business because they're delivering the number. Maybe they've got the key account relationship, but what you don't see is the impact they're having on all the other reps. And if you're looking at your sales organization through the lens of performance versus quota, when so many of those factors around what their patch was and the key customers and all that sort of stuff, as well as just are they actually a good egg and they fit within the business, often I've seen the uplift of getting rid of that person, even if they're the top performer, will have on the entire rest of the team. And you can have a bigger uplift in terms of the total revenue by removing a divider, as I would call them, similarly who's against the cultural DNA of your business, than just measuring against quota. And I think it's one of the biggest risks that people have when they don't have a rubric like you've got in the way that you analyze sales organizations and breakthrough and enablement, is if you only measure on numbers, it's so two-dimensional that you're not seeing the wider picture and impact on the team. And I guarantee you remove the wrong person from the organization, regardless of their performance, everyone will thank you for it. And they probably wouldn't have said anything in the meantime, but it will be all you hear about for the next few years is, thank God that you removed that person from the business.
I couldn't agree more. I had, I would argue it's not just, I think, I would even think, in my experience working with startups, mid-size, and really large technology companies, startups are probably better at hiring and keeping for culture because it's a smaller group. They want to make, the founder has a very strong culture idea, or the founders, and they want to maintain that culture at all costs. And I think that's a really good thing, as long as it's the right thing. Whereas mid-size, and especially when you get into the large teams, sales leaders right off the bat are mostly data analysis kind of people, right? The old spreadsheet jock. Now it's they sit around. They actually don't listen to Gong as much as they should. They're just looking in CRM and looking at statistics and calculating days in stage with their enablement partner or with their operations partner. And they're like, oh, such and such, he's done his number, she's done her number every year for the last 6 years. Yeah, but it's almost by luck, and then you get this like reinforcing behavior. I don't know about this guy or this girl. She's new and she's got the biggest deal in my forecast. Get me such and such that's hit his number for the last 3 years. I'm going to hand the deal over to him and they'll split the commissions. So you're reinforcing this. The guy, meanwhile, this poor person that's only been with the company a year that you don't trust for whatever reason, probably because you don't have a rubric and you're not doing joint reviews with them. You don't have as much faith in them. So you give a deal that she or he has worked their tails off to get to stage 5. They're almost there. And then this guy comes in, gets all the glory. And guess what? That's another year that he has where he's done his number. So you see a lot of that in big companies. You don't see that so much in startups, thank goodness. Another reason we like working with startups.
Yeah, for sure. But what you might have is again, this company stage thing is there's a company that really needs your help, but they've been around for 10 years and they're still small in revenue number, or they're stuck at a revenue number. but they're actually quite a mature business, and they just have someone who's been there for 8 years.
Oh yeah, you get
And,
yeah, that's absolutely right.
and you've got this kind of like, this like burn value prophecy, which is like, oh, well, we've got so much invested in this person, it would be a real shame to lose them. And actually, it's a really tough decision that sometimes you need an external person to come in and look at your business objectively and give you a different lens to look at the problem through.
That's absolutely right. And the other side of the coin as well, which we've seen, is you given a 12-month chance, and you genuinely, the first 12 months you invest a lot in an AE, not financially as much as knowledge, going out making mistakes, because we all make mistakes in our first year, because especially smaller companies, they don't maybe have the enablement. Actually, big companies often don't have really great enablement. And then after 12 months, like, person hasn't sold enough, get rid of them. And guess what? You start again, and you make all that investment in the next person. So that's the other side of that.
Yeah, for sure.
And identifying
I'm
that,
wondering-
saying it's all about behaviors. It really is.
Yeah, 100%. Attitude drives behavior, behavior drives technique. I learned that very early, and it's always stuck. So final thoughts then, gentlemen. What final thoughts would you like to leave our listeners with today? Charles, would you like to start?
I think maybe the one from the beginning, right? Just be aware that you don't know what you don't know, and getting an external lens just to have a look at things and help you make that decision of whether you need to hire one and what that looks like, is a very important decision, right? The other one is that bad salespeople are really good interviewers. So be really careful about that, and potentially get someone that's done sales before in that interview process, because they can whip you up and talk about loads of different things and spin you around, but you hire them because they sounded good, but they'll be shit. So get someone in the sales process that's done sales in that sales process.
Yeah, for sure. How about you, Douglas? What closing thoughts would you like to share?
So my closing thoughts are this. Right? Unless you're a very experienced founder, this is your third or fourth rodeo, you know exactly what time to hire salespeople, you know exactly when to move to a sales leader. Talk to somebody like Richard, Charles, or myself. By the way, if anybody wants a free 30-minute consultation on any of these go-to-market topics, Charles and I are always open to that. We'll put our details in the link. But, think about getting somebody from the outside. If you're PE owned or VC supported and they have some people, great. Talk to them. Don't be afraid to reach out. If not, talk to somebody like us and say, look, I don't know. I'm spending too much time managing these really sloppy salespeople that I hired. I don't know if I hired the right ones. I don't know if the timing's right. There's people out there that can help you, and it will allow your business to grow so much faster, so much smoother, if you hire the right salespeople at the right time, the right sales leader at the right time. That's what I'll leave you with.
Beautiful. And if someone wanted to get in contact with ClosingFoundry to understand how you could help them, we'll put a link in the comments so people can connect with you guys on LinkedIn, as well as see a bit more information about the services that you offer. But it's a real pleasure. Thank you for coming on and sharing your expertise.
It's been great fun. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it, Richard.
Awesome. Everyone else, we'll see you on the next episode.
Thank you for listening. And if you enjoyed this conversation, we've got a newsletter called Growth Magnet on LinkedIn, where we take the best insights from all of these episodes and turn them into bite-sized format for you to enjoy.